Welcome to the Time to Fly podcast. It's time to give your business wings and take flight to achieve more impact, influence, and income with unique perspectives, tools, and tips from successful entrepreneurs and business professionals to help your business fly. Here to educate, encourage, and entertain you with their own unique perspectives and experience, plus sharing anecdotes of growing up as cowgirls. Here's your host, Jill Fleming.
Welcome to this episode of Time to Fly, Give Your Business Wings. I'm your host, Jill Fleming. Today I am here interviewing Manjit Khalsa. Manjit is an international author, speaker, educator, coach, change agent, and is the creator of Shopping for Your Future and Dating Deliciously. Manjit empowers men and women all around the world using smart questions, laser-sharp intuition, and dynamic, pragmatic tools that allow you to choose a life that truly works for you. A life that not only inspires you, but inspires everyone around you to choose something greater for themselves as a result of you being you. Manjit graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry and a master's degree in Nano Technology. She has 17 years experience working with youth in England and Australia to educate and create possibilities, often where there were none. As a superb communicator and listener, Manjit has worked as a coach for over 10 years, leading and facilitating workshops, retreats, and online classes. Welcome, Manjit. I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Jill. I'm really happy to be here too. Thank you so much for having me.
Manjit, as an expert in relationships, of personal relationships as well as business relationships, I'm really excited to talk to you about building deep and meaningful relationships in business. So I know often as entrepreneurs, we get into work and we become a solopreneur and we really become kind of like the Lone Ranger. What is your experience working with people to really shift that viewpoint and do more of a viewpoint of collaboration and co-creation versus being the Lone Ranger in your business?
Well, first of all, I'm flattered that you introduced me as an expert in relationships. And I'd like just to say to everybody who's listening, we're all experts in the relationships we create. And we're experts in knowing what works for us and the relationships we'd like to have and the relationships we don't really want to have in our lives. So thank you for calling me an expert, and I will acknowledge that. And your question really was around being a Lone Ranger. Well, Jill, when I first started to work on my business, I had been a teacher for 17 years, and my whole life was around students and teachers and teams and, educators from feeder schools. And so it was really full of lots and lots of people. And then growing up in a Sikh community, everything was about community and everything was about family. So to go from all of that, having such a range of people in my life and this vastness of interests and personalities and characters and things that really added to my life, I went from that to really sort of working online. So there was this period of complete depression in my world where I went from having such a fruitful life to then really having nobody around, because the business world was so different to the teaching world or the community that I grew up in. So starting to then look at what would I like to create now? How would I like to start having those deeper, meaningful connections, even though I'm building a business? And a lot of it is working on your own. A lot of it is working on projects. So for me, it was super important. Otherwise, I would fail at my business if I don't have those meaningful conversations, those meaningful relationships, those heart-centered connections. Without that, my life wasn't worth living.
Yes, I totally understand that. I went through that season as well, right after I quit my corporate job, being the solo entrepreneur of I was doing everything. And I hadn't realized that I had gotten so much connection from my coworkers on a daily basis, just being able to have conversations and connect around the water cooler or sit and have lunch with somebody on the lunch break, than going to it just being me. And I went through a season of depression as well, where I wasn't really around people, and I decided I needed to get out and be around more people and go to networking events to try to meet some people to build a community of entrepreneurs around me so that I did have those connections.
Yeah, beautiful. And I would really liked it if somebody had spoken about this before I quit my job and became an entrepreneur, because there was this huge transition. Like you said, having those conversations around the photocopier, or having those conversations where you're sitting on a bench outside, those were taken for granted when I had a job. And nobody really talks about that transition from work to becoming an entrepreneur, and how to then support yourself emotionally, how to support yourself energetically, because a lot of the interactions we have when we have a job is with our coworkers. So I had wished somebody had actually spoken about that and said, hey, it's going to be completely different. So here are some of the ways you can actually start creating connections, heart-centered relationships. And oftentimes as an entrepreneur, you're so different as well with people who are actually going out to work every day. You're then different to all your friendship circles if they've got a 9-to-5 job. And all of a sudden the world can seem to appear a little bit dark and a little bit scary and a little bit challenging. And I often wonder, the people who are out there who want to create something, have a vision, how many of them stay in jobs because of this fear of this transition, or not quite knowing how to transition into having more fruitful, beautiful relationships?
I think that's a very valid point. Thinking back about the transition for me, I definitely went through that period because being in a job, you're used to that environment. And when I transitioned out of it and was just by myself, it was very lonely. And especially for me being single, I didn't have a partner to talk through at the end of the day. So it was even more lonely taking that leap of faith into entrepreneurship on my own. And I remember when I had finally made that transition, is I had gotten back from boycotting winter in Mexico, and I'd been gone for about 3 months. And I met people on that trip that were like me. They were out in the world, out experiencing life, out choosing adventure. And I had met somebody that was bike riding across North America. And I met a woman from Germany who was there volunteering at the turtle camp. And I just met really interesting people that were out doing things differently than what I experienced from the culture of being in a job. The moment I realized I'd made that transition was I had gotten back and I had a meeting downtown, and it was at 8:30. And as I was driving downtown to the place where I used to drive downtown to go to work, I looked around at the people in traffic around me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I used to be these people. I used to be them that was going to the job of doing the 9-to-5 and in that routine. And I realized that I had made that full transition at that moment because I felt not of that world anymore.
So cool. Yeah. And the transition for me was similar too. So some of the things I put in place for myself was the travel. Because that's one of the greatest things you can actually do as an entrepreneur is you're able to work. Well, for me, my business was all online, so I was able to work anywhere as long as I had my computer and a great internet connection. So travel became something that allowed me to meet people I would never normally meet. And also like taking classes and pursuing those interests. Because I don't know about you, I didn't really pursue my interests when I was working. It was the job. You came home, you ate dinner, and you recovered from the job. Maybe you fit in a workout, and then you went back to the job. And there was nothing different. There was nothing in my life at the time that actually fulfilled me emotionally and spiritually. So taking classes like dance, taking classes like painting, taking classes that had nothing to really do with my business. So it also opened up doors to meeting people who weren't entrepreneurs. And the other thing I also did was I found local entrepreneurs groups in the city that I was in and meetup groups. So I joined like a group in Sydney called the Entourage, which was full of lots of other entrepreneurs wanting to build their business. We had a workspace and collaborative drinks and meetups and all of this entire social network that got created. So there was a period of that. And I wanted to talk about how then to create meaningful relationships based on choice versus default. Because when you're working, the relationships you create are just by default. You just work under the same roof. That's why you're friends. You go to the same meetings. That's why you connect. You happen to have lunch at the same time, and hence you get into conversations. The one thing I really loved about being an entrepreneur was it really had me look at what actually created depth in my life. What are the conversations that inspire me? What types of business models and creative people would I like to be around? Who can I learn from? And who out there is even greater than me that would invite me to different possibilities? Because in a job, you're pretty much all doing the same thing. There was no real growth. And occasionally you'll have a great conversation with somebody, but it was still around the same sort of lifestyle. Whereas this really stretched me to have a look at, what is that for me? What inspires me? And where are these people? And that was the beginning of really, really owning the power of becoming an entrepreneur and the power of becoming a coach. Was this space of, I get to choose now. I get to choose and select who comes into my life rather than the default of we work under the same umbrella.
I love that concept because that is so true. When you're in a work environment, you really do. The relationships you have around you are by default. And even though you may not like all your coworkers, you have to spend time with them. As an entrepreneur, you do get to choose. You do get to choose who you spend your time with. You do get to choose who your clients are. You do get to choose. And that is absolutely one of the best parts of being an entrepreneur, is that you get to design who you surround yourself with.
Yes, and it's so important as a business owner, as someone who's working for themselves, to really cultivate the energy of possibility, to really have people around you who are cheerleading you on, who are supporting you. Because oftentimes your dreams are a little bit far-fetched. You know, here I was, I remember leaving my job, and everybody in the workplace, and even my friends and family at the time, were like, that's crazy. Why are you leaving a full-time, permanent job? You know, it's a government job. You get a pension, you get these holidays and all of this stuff. And why are you leaving to pursue this dream over here that you don't even know if it's going to work? So there's all of this doubt that comes from your initial circle. So that circle, that inner circle, the circle where you're interacting with people every day, you're having these conversations every day, to keep it uplifted and to keep it about possibility and to have you engage with being the best version of you becomes a priority. Otherwise, in business, for me, you're a dead man walking. It isn't going to work if you doubt yourself. It isn't going to work if you start to become frustrated at things or if you just want to give up. Being an entrepreneur or running a business is not for people who want to give up. It's not for people who want an easy life. It's not for people who will settle for just mediocre. So even in relationships, you don't get to settle for mediocre. You don't get to just have a conversation that's just about the weather and whinge and moan and complain. Those conversations actually impact our business. Those conversations impact our well-being. And when you start working for yourself, you become your business a lot of the time. And the business requires you to put energy into it. And the business is also desiring and requiring of you to have something more deeper. Because when your connection with the world is deeper, and the connection with yourself is deeper, and the connections with others are deeper, guess what? The thing that you're putting out there, the thing that you're selling, that connection with your clients is also going to be something deeper.
I love that because that's so true. I experienced that as well when I went to leave my job because I had the benefits, the pension, the days off. And I actually had coworkers try to intervention me to talk me out of quitting my job. As you take that leap into entrepreneurship, those that don't understand it often try to block you from doing it. And I remember talking to coworkers and they're like, oh, that's a terrible idea. How are you going to pay your bills? It was all pessimistic. But then when I would talk to other people who were in my circle of friends who were entrepreneurs, they were encouraging of like, oh my gosh, you're going to be great. It's going to be awesome. You know what? What do you have to lose? And that was one of the things that actually made me take that leap is, what do you have to lose? What's the absolute worst case scenario? And my absolute worst case scenario was that if I failed, that I would just go back and get another corporate job. But I couldn't see myself staying in that corporate job and being happy in it because I was so miserable.
And the question I prefer is like, what's the best case scenario? And that's where you're like, when you're surrounding yourself with people who really want you to go for it. And what I'd say for anybody listening right now is like, you're probably listening to Jill and I going, hang on a minute, you went from a job and all of a sudden you've got these great people around you. And, you know, the tips and tools at the moment have been like, see if you can join a networking group. See if you can find an entrepreneurs group around you. But if you live somewhere, like there was a point where I lived quite remote and accessing those groups until I moved to a city weren't really accessible. So also just become aware with social media and with having such a global reach now. For most people, you can access groups online. You can join Facebook groups. You can join in with podcasts like this one and others that keeps the momentum and keeps the energy vibrating at the space and the energy of possibility. And that's super, super important for you, no matter where you're at in your business, to be engaging in those conversations and to be reading the books that really inspire you too. I mean, I don't remember who said that, but like basically you're the average of the 5 people you communicate with. And those 5 people don't necessarily have to be a person. It can also be like, what am I reading? What YouTube clips am I watching? What podcast am I listening to? And, where am I going to eat? Where am I going to like work out? Are all of these environments generative, creative, and meaningful for me? Because essentially that relationship with you is super important when you're running a business, and to take care of that and harness that until you grow your wings is really, really important to prioritize those small choices that then become the big choices.
I love that. We need to take a quick break for our sponsor, but when we come back, I would love to talk more about the relationship with self as we become entrepreneurs.
This episode is sponsored by the book Freedom to Fly, the visionary leader's guide to unlocking your unique freedom code to confidently create more impact, influence, and income. Get your copy of this best-selling book on Amazon.com.
Welcome back. I am here with Manjit Khalsa, and we are talking about relationships in business. And before the break, we had talked a little bit about relationship with yourself. Manjit, can you expand more on that? Because I know for me, as I've become an entrepreneur, learning more about my relationship with myself and learning more about what drives me has been quite a journey. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that relationship with self. I mean, every self-help book on the planet is about learning about the self. But a lot of us as entrepreneurs, that relationship with self is even more important than, say, most people out there. And the reason being is most of us have a dream. And that dream is so unique to us. And like you said earlier, like a lot of people try and talk you out of that dream. And a lot of people are like, how is that even going to work? And what possesses you to leave your job and go and fulfill this dream? If you don't have that core confidence and that depth and that nurturing and that knowing of who you are, there are going to be so many roadblocks. There are going to be bumps. There are going to be things that come into your world that have you question why you're even doing this. So to really, really, truly create that dream and keep yourself on purpose and keep yourself focused through the days where, you know what, clients didn't pay. Nobody's saying yes to your amazing package, even though you spent 6 months creating this great program and nobody said yes. You've just had all of these discovery calls and nobody signed up to anything you're offering. Those things happen as you're learning. And that relationship with yourself in those moments is a relationship that keeps you going for that vision, that keeps you grounded in yourself. So that relationship with you has to come from a depth. It has to come from that space of totally loving you, totally being your own cheerleader, and learning what it is to be your own best friend in those moments. So I'd like to share one of the activities. So we've all had it as entrepreneurs. We've all had it in businesses where it's just despair. Nobody's saying yes. And you're like, but I'm brilliant at this. And I know that I can help people create this. And then as you go through the weeks or you go through the months and nothing seems to be changing, there's this moment of, am I really good at this? Should I be doing this? Should I go back to what I was doing? And that little doubt, that little voice starts to get a little bit louder. In those moments is where I feel you've got to stop and talk to yourself as though you talk to your own best friend. It's time to be your own best friend in those moments and really look at it like, what would you say to your best friend? Would you tell her to quit and go back to her job? Would you tell her she's useless? Would you tell her she can't do this? Would you tell her just because all these people said no, obviously she's missing something? Or would you start to encourage her and have her keep going? Have her look at something differently? But those words of encouragement are so easy for other people. And those dreams that we see other people have are so easy to cheerlead them on. But as you work for yourself and as you're creating this dream, it is so important that you learn who you are for you. You actually become who you require you to become for you. If you require those words of affirmation, if you require to go get yourself a coach, if you require to go out and cry and tell someone it's crap, have all of that in place, but learn to start being your own best friend. Someone who has your back, somebody who cheerleads you, and do what it takes. Go get the help, go take the class, go learn about this stuff, become an expert, but become an expert with yourself included. Always include you in what you're choosing.
That's wonderful advice, Manjit. And yeah, doubt is definitely the killer of dreams. You and I both do coaching and come alongside clients as they're making these transitions. And I kind of look at it as like we're a little bit like training wheels, right? We're kind of there when it gets a little wobbly, we pick them back up, dust them back off, and get them back on their bicycle and going again. And so sometimes when people can't be their own cheerleader, that's where we come in to be that cheerleader from a place of knowledge. We've been on this entrepreneurial journey for many more years. And so for those that have been in business for a few years and are running into challenges, sometimes you may want to bring a coach in to help you have a different perspective and to be that cheerleader and be that person that holds you accountable to those dreams that you have.
Yeah, I love that. And for me, I've always had a coach. Even if I've been an entrepreneur for 10 years, or even if I've been coaching for 10 years, I've always had a mentor and a coach. I personally feel it's really important to keep that because we're always transitioning. The person you are today is not going to be the person you are tomorrow. That's the nature of this game. So having mentorship, having masterminds, having those groups of people that keep you also expanding and stretching yourself is a way to live now. So it becomes very normal to have little voice of doubt show up in your head, and you know how to deal with her now. You've had so much experience with her, but you've had even more experience with your best friend who's just like, go, you're amazing. And, and then that voice of reason who's like, okay, we need to try something a bit different. How about we try a different perspective over here? So those voices and that stretching between the doubt and stretching into the person you want to become tomorrow, super important to have mentors and your own voice and all of those things that support that dream in place. And the other thing I really want to say about that is what I really love about those moments, those challenging moments, those moments that feel dark, those are the places where the universe and our businesses really invite us to receive more. Because if no challenges ever came up, just imagine you woke up tomorrow, you decide to create a business, everything goes smooth as pie, you're perfect at it, you were born for this, the clients just come in, you just know how to build a funnel and you know how to transition and nothing was ever wrong, you'd never actually grow. And you'd never really receive information. You'd never really receive guidance that's out there. So in a way, I think the universe sets it up so beautifully so that you get to reflect and you actually have to go seeking to receive information from others. You have to go out there and be vulnerable with your peers and create those meaningful relationships for you. Otherwise, there'd be no need for it. There'd be no need to be humbled,
I love that because that is so true. Entrepreneurship is the ultimate personal growth journey. I have learned so much about myself and learned so much on this journey for myself that you're right. If it was all easy as pie and all went super smooth, then the investment and the value wouldn't be there and it wouldn't stretch and grow you and make you seek out other alternatives and seek out mentors and seek out people to help you grow and shift and make the journey more enjoyable.
Absolutely. So I know, and you probably know, anybody listening to this, if you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, none of you signed up for an easy life. If you wanted an easy life, you would have married somebody next door, you would have moved down the road from your parents, you would have stuck to a 9-to-5 job, but none of us signed up for that. We actually signed up for adventure. We signed up for depth. We signed up for a life that gave us pleasure, a life that gave us possibilities, a life that opened up doorways. But to open those doorways, there's all of this growth, there's all of this space, and ultimately what you get in all of this, whether it's through a business or whether it's through other choices you've made because of your business, what if all of that was actually to create that depth and that meaningful connection, that intimate relationship with yourself? What if that's, one of the things that we get to add to our lives because we chose to go down this journey? And anyone out there who has those moments of like, I wish this was just easy. Did you sign up for an easy life, or did you sign up for an adventure? Did you want mediocre, or were you here to thrive and be fulfilled and have such depth and such possibility in your world that you're inspired every day? And I think anybody listening can probably guarantee didn't sign up for mediocre and you didn't sign up for easy. So those moments, even though I'm giggling, where you're feeling like things are going badly, just remember, I didn't sign up for easy. I signed up for growth. I signed up to be a possibility in the world. I signed up to live my dreams. And that's going to take some growth, and it's messy and it's all over the place. It's not a linear, like, this creates this and this creates this. And if I followed these 10 steps from this mentor over here, I'm going to get to this. No, it's going to go all over the place. There's going to be days where you're like, I'm on top of my game. And there's days where you're like, oh my God, nobody loves me. This is rubbish. I should just go back to my job. But all of that is the beauty of what you're creating. And all of that is what creates the meaningful relationship you have with you, with your friends, with your business, and, ultimately in the partnerships you create as well.
That is so true. The entrepreneurial roller coaster ride of the ups, the downs, maybe I should just go back and get a job. That would be so much easier. But the thought of doing that just crushes your soul. And so you're like, okay, that isn't an option. So I really need to figure this out.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes I think we think we're alone and we're the only people who are going through it. But for your listeners, Jill, if anybody's listening, would you get we're all in the same boat, and most of us have the same thoughts, and most of us have the same fears, and most of us come up against the same challenges. But what I want to say is, if you're living your dream and you're running your business, I'm inspired by what you're creating in the world. I don't even need to know what it is that you're doing or putting out there. But what I know is the growth it takes, and wow, the tenacity and vulnerability it takes to create something different in the world takes some courage. It takes some strength, and it takes a lot of backbone. So please know that. And your relationship to you is never going to be the same again. And I don't know if we want to talk about this, or this is going to open up something, but as you know, I work a lot with men and women at looking at those more intimate relationships, like partnerships. And I find with entrepreneurs, that's always like a space where they're challenged. And I feel as though it's because we're so driven and have so much excellence and pride in what we do, that just going out with somebody or having a partnership with somebody who's also not able to support that or doesn't really understand that is going to be something that doesn't work. We're also looking for people who are a bit different. So would you also become aware of how unique you are? Even though all of us are very similar, we're very unique in the world.
I think that's so true, especially in personal relationships. I am single as well, and I have found that I really can't date, men that work 9 to 5. They get very jealous of my lifestyle, of having the freedom and the flexibility to be able to go, even though a lot of times I'm working, but I get to work from almost anywhere. And I think that is a very valid thing. Entrepreneurs are a different breed. They do have that backbone. They do have that perseverance and that confidence to go out in the world and create something different. And when we're striving for so much, it's really difficult to be with a mediocre partner. We want a partner who's a level of excellence as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And dating. Yes, it's a whole other minefield, and probably not for this podcast, but to create that deep and meaningful connection whilst you're dating as well, and showing up as your best self, but also having that standard for the person that you're dating and not lowering those values and that core confidence and knowing what you're here to create. Because as we know, inviting people into our world and who we have around us is really important, especially in those pivotal moments of change. And if we're growing, it has to be nurturing, it has to be supportive, it has to be kind and encouraging. And also, for someone to see you for all the work that you're doing. For me, that's very, very, very important, is to be acknowledged in those spaces and to be allowed to be vulnerable and nourished, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. And yeah, it's very important that I meet people who are growing, whether it's those personal relationships, business relationships, or relationship with just even the people you live with.
That's so true. Thank you so much for that, Manjit. So how would our listeners get in touch with you?
So the best place to come find me is I'm all over social media, but if you would like more inspiration and you'd like some questions and you'd like some of that supportive, nurturing, more deeper, meaningful space I spoke about, I have a free group on Facebook and it's called Shopping for Your Future. Come and join me there. Come and play with me there. Come and interact with me. There are a ton of great questions and conversations and people on there who are engaging in those more uplifting spaces. So come and find me there. And if you want any other information about dating deliciously or any other bits and pieces we've spoken about, email me on choosingdeliciously@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Manjit, for being on the show today. I've loved our conversation around relationships in business, personal relationships, and please reach out to Manjit, get involved in her group. She has wonderful things for you. Please tune into our next show, and remember, it is time to fly. Give your business wings.
A big thank you to this episode's sponsor, Freedom to Fly, the visionary leader's guide to unlocking your unique freedom code to confidently create more impact, influence, and income. Get your copy of this best-selling book on Amazon.com.
Join our flock. Stay informed of all things Time to Fly by subscribing to our newsletter at timetoflypodcast.com. And be sure to tune in to our next show.